Frog Guy Report, February 2022. 7 months. 7 long months. That's how long it took for me to complete the Halo review saga. When it first started, it was going well. But then setback after setback, school rising up, and Halo Infinite made what was going to be a quick and decisive end into an era of Halo. Of course, that's all this channel is now. A Halo channel. But now, it's beautiful. Halo Wars 2 is considered to be one of the best Halo games post-Bungie, and in my opinion, as of now, it is the best game post-Bungie era. A sequel to Halo Wars, a game that almost didn't even come out, but built and developed its own fan base over the years. Halo is no longer just an FPS franchise. Halo Wars 1 has paved the way for Halo to explore more forms of media. However, the impact of Halo Wars does not define the sequel. So how good was Halo Wars 2 really? Well, before we get into this, the upbringing of Halo Wars 2 interests me. Not really anything that happened during development, because Halo Wars 2 did have a normal development to my knowledge. 343 did bring a creative assembly to help, but what interests me is the fact that they even wanted to make another Halo Wars. This game came out after Halo 5, so maybe they wanted to take a step back or something. Halo Wars did have its fan base, but there wasn't any extreme demand for it. Probably like a similar situation to how people want an ODST sequel. But whatever inspiration 343 got to make this game didn't just stem from wanting to take a break, because their effort shows when you play Halo Wars 2. But dude, we have to talk about the trailers. Of course, Halo fans today are not ones to get excited over a trailer, but damn man, it's just awesome to watch the I Know You trailer, knowing that the game turned out to be good, dude. Just look at how unique and masterful this trailer is. This is probably the most well-made trailer I've probably ever seen. Of course, there are other trailers that showed like cutscenes, but this trailer is one that I would regret not mentioning. You cannot tell me that you do not feel emotion when watching this thing, like Jesus Christ. Everything leading up to Halo Wars 2 was mostly positive. Of course, the trust of 343 was not there, but building trust does not come from the trailers. And I think that was a big factor going into Halo Wars 2, to show that Halo could still take steps in the right direction, even with the absence of pressure. So let's go. When you first boot up Halo Wars 2, you are greeted with one of the best Halo main menu themes in years. Created is not just a good Halo theme because of how good it sounds, but because of what it represents. First impressions do matter a lot, and this being the first thing you hear when you come into Halo Wars 2 is just perfect. Every time I would boot this game up, I would stay in the main menu just thinking about Halo. Sure, I have grown past it, but that takes nothing away from how good this theme song is. And the UI itself isn't even half bad. It has a nice way of showing you all the information. It has the quick access options on the bottom and the specific menus on the top. I will say it is kind of annoying to scroll through maps and campaign missions, but despite that, it's a good UI. However, it is carried by the background that shows the diorama of both the UNSC soldiers and the units and Banished. But yeah, the style does lean on the military part of Halo, and that is just good for an RTS game. So now, the variety. This is the point where I have to make the distinction clear between the base game and the DLC included. Halo Wars 2 has grown, but only behind a paywall, and I'm not going to sit here and constantly point out the differences, because that's dumb, alright? So I'm going to judge the game, DLC included, and talk about how the base game would stack up in one sentence, alright? So yeah, the variety is good, alright? You have 20 campaign missions, 3 multiplayer game modes with good customization and 11 maps, a new experimental Blitz mode that includes its own progression system and a firefight mode, and the crowned Terminus Firefight, which is the ultimate combination of everything else in the game in my opinion. In contrast to the underwhelming lack of modes from the first game, Halo Wars 2 will not leave you without stuff to do. Now, the progression in this game is exactly what you'd expect, right? There's nothing crazy that I would ask for, but the number levels do their job, right? There's a good amount of ranked game modes that are satisfying to grind. You can collect cards for Blitz and build up your decks. There are daily and weekly challenges. There's also cool skulls to collect in the campaign. Obviously, legendary. Obviously, you can't customize a Spartan in an RTS game, but it's an RTS game, alright? For the amount of scale and depth that goes on during the gameplay, customization is just not needed, alright? The progression does its job and it does it well. So now, the gameplay. This game is very similar to the first game when it comes to the gameplay. They both have those 7-slot bases where you can have the generators, the tech building, and the units building. Except a notable difference is that Halo Wars 2 did energy, like a different currency to manage, while the first game did like the energy level. Halo Wars 2 kind of separates the energy in the first game to tech level and energy, which I think Halo Wars 2 might have added more strategy because of this, but nothing too crazy. It feels more like a change and might just come down to preference. However, Halo Wars 2 did make some improvements. For one, the units can actually move out of each other's way, like Jesus Christ, bro. They also made the turrets more role-based instead of being able to stack them like in the first game. I will say camo is just annoying as it was in the first game, but there are more ways around it now, and it's more balanced. Leader powers now have more of a presence and aren't just units that only some leaders have access to. You can put down barricades to help fortify. Halo Wars 2 does feel more refined and sharp than the first game, and players will be quick to notice. The sandbox of Halo Wars 2 really services the gameplay. More units have more strengths, but for every strength they have a weakness. There aren't too many overpowered units, although it can be tricky to effectively use some of them. Likewise, the leader powers can range from absolute dog to like heaven bread. Despite these small hiccups though, Halo Wars 2 does have an excellent sandbox, and it would be a waste not to mention some of my favorites. The Goliaths are just so good, huge hunters that destroy buildings, just 5,000 pounds of pure meat, bro. The armored warthog is just the best thing I've ever seen. The Mastodon is also wildly creative with it being able to carry up to 3 infantry guys. The methane wagon is just like the Plants vs. Zombies Cobb cannon with that big missile it shoots. The Wraith Invader is like the best Wraith of all time. The Colossus is an obvious pick for anyone with a brain. Like, look at this thing, dude. And then all the hero units, like Sergeant Johnson is in his original Spartan armor, and Barbator, he's just genius. Halo Wars 2 probably has the best sandbox of any RTS game, and maybe that's just because I'm biased, alright, because of my love for Halo, but let's be honest, alright? The wild creativity of these units is just insane, and one of this game's greatest strengths. However, while this game does have the insane library, Halo Wars 1 OG does have some edges over it. Like my favorite vehicle, the Elephant, the mobile base that can deploy infantry, and there's nothing like it in Halo Wars 2. There's also an absence of Flood besides in like Terminus Firefight. In Halo Wars 1, the Flood would sometimes be that third faction in a match, and that was always awesome. Still insane, but like, bro, I just want my Elephant, dude. Now, it's time for the maps. And this is where I have to say that scenery doesn't really matter to me because it's like in an RTS game, you know. There's no map that I'm always excited to play on because I honestly think all these maps are really similar. Not anything too crazy to separate them. They have all these points guarded by sentinels, maybe like one light bridge and a few garrisons. And the map layout like may be good too, but there's really not much to say here. It doesn't suck. This is where I think Halo Wars 1 did a better job. There's just tons of stuff to do in Halo Wars 1's map that just adds so much to the experience, you know? You have garrisons, but like there's more types of garrisons. Big towers that guard the barriers when you can open and close. There's like lost units. There's also like floods sometimes. Halo Wars 2 could have really done a lot more. And while the additions of Halo Wars 1 might be seen as like gimmicks, they make the matches a lot more dynamic, right? Also the fact that Halo Wars 1 just had like a way more variety setting because Halo Wars 2 really wanted to focus on the arc. And the standard game modes are all good too. Domination and Strongholds can be fun, but really the start game mode is just the normal one. I feel it adds most to the strategy because it simulates like real warfare, as in like beating your enemy. It's like a lot more satisfying to wipe them out than to just like get points like more than them, you know. Also 1v1, 2v2, and 3v3 like all are good. There's nothing much to say there. There's nothing that stands out like as absolute crack, but I will say that sometimes partied up kids on 3v3 can be very annoying. Blitz is the big mode of this game, and I think it's okay. It's definitely a breath of fresh air from building bases, but it's really unbalanced, right? And straight up just pay to win. Like, it's not hard at all to get these free Blitz packs, and you'd be an idiot to spend money on them, but like still, you know, better cards are better than lesser cards, and you get cards by getting packs. However, I do find the mode to be very enjoyable, but like not something I would take seriously, you know? That's like an instant monitor break if I actually took it seriously. There's also Blitz Firefight, which is like the same mechanics as Blitz, but you have to survive. I really enjoyed this too because I like survival, but that's the thing with like Blitz in general, you know? It's enjoyable, but like it's not anything crazy, you know? It's less like a third mode and more like a big gimmick, you know? I love how it opens up units, but there's not as much strategy that I enjoy that comes with managing bases, you know? It's just good, but nothing much to say, you know? But guys, you knew what the best one was in this game before you even clicked the video, bro. Terminus Firefight is what I consider to be the centerpiece of this game. It feels like every idea introduced is combined here to make an experience that is just so good, bro. Basically, you have to defend a terminus from waves of enemies by building up your defenses and fortifying. It also combines invading because you have to expand to fortify, you know? These enemies can range from Banish to humans to Flood, and I love the Flood in this game, bro. I'll talk about it more, but it is just such a well-made experience that really puts your back against the wall and forces you to think quickly. It is a must-play for Halo fans and RTS fans. Terminus Firefight is the big third mode of Halo Wars 2. But yeah, bro, overall, Halo Wars 2 has an excellent multiplayer selection. A good amount of different modes that all deliver a different experience. The gameplay and the sandbox are both executed really well and up the strategy of the game. And that's the point of real-time strategy. This game is awesome, and there's a reason that this game has built up a name for itself, even outside of Halo. But guys, with the campaign, it's obvious that 343 had something to prove. They wanted to prove the responsibility for the franchise and also wanted to deliver a worthy sequel to the first game. And a lot of people thought it looked awesome, but were worried because of Halo 5's marketing. Nobody could even trust the gameplay anymore, man. So, how did the campaign turn out? Well, to start, the biggest question that RTS fans had. Could 343 and Creative Assembly make a good RTS game? Well, let me tell you, bro. They can, and they did. Halo Wars 2 has very good level design. It's not the best ever. There are problems, but for the most part, it is very good. So yeah, this campaign is really carried by its gameplay, and that's not an insult at all. Alright, the gameplay is good, and that's really the only thing you need in an RTS game for it to be good. However, in a campaign, you have to go the extra mile in structuring the levels in different ways to encourage the player to think differently. And Halo Wars 2 does this well, you know? There are a good amount of levels where your resources are taken away from you, and you have to carefully manage your troops. Like in the level Under the Dark, it's very atmospheric, and you have to keep your Kodiaks alive and place them in their specific spots. You also have to make sure your snipers stay alive to spot out landmines. Eventually, you do get to use a base, but in order to take the base, you don't really get any tank units, so you have to use stealth to your advantage. To me, the level design is at its most interesting when the experience is something that couldn't really happen anywhere else, you know? Sure, building a base and dominating is fun, but that is sometimes just a lesser version of a multiplayer match, you know? The Alice level where you have to defend yourself with weights, that was awesome, you know? However, with 11 levels and the story being the Spirit of Fire establishing themselves on the Ark, there wasn't really like that much of an opportunity for creative experience all throughout, you know? Sometimes you can go like 1 or 2 levels that just don't feel inspired, and it makes the campaign drag on sometimes. And this is more of a problem with just me with RTS games, but in general, but yeah, man, the way the levels are, it just can be a task to get the next level started because you have to restart and build up your base like every time, dude. Halo Wars 2 has some really good moments, right? And this is good level design, but I feel that it is held back by the story's premise a little bit. With Halo Wars 1 being an adventure throughout the galaxy, Halo Wars 2 feels a little bit more dragged on sometimes, but there are a lot of creative levels here. So now we go into what 343 had to prove the most with this game. Could they still produce a good story? After Halo 5, dude, many people were just still scared of how disconnected a story could be in a franchise that they loved so much. It's kind of weird, but it's actually kind of justified, A lot of people were just in beyond disbelief when the story came out that bad. However, Halo Wars 2 is not Halo 5.
Wake up. Something has happened. The Spirit of Fire is in a situation I could not anticipate. I'm certain Professor Anders would enjoy that little admission. So let's keep it between us, shall we? We've been adrift for just over 28 years. I've made quite a few repairs while you were sleeping. So ship systems are 100%. Cryo worked well, and med stats on all remaining crew are green. As for me, well, regulations are clear about final dispensation at the end of an AI's 7-year lifespan. I took care of my own arrangements rather than wake you. I didn't want to... Well, I hope you can forgive this final breach of protocol. It was a pleasure and an honor to serve with you, sir. Do look after everyone for me, would you? Goodbye, Captain. Serena out.
This has to be my favorite opening scene in any video game, dude. And the reason why is because of the amount of progress the scene makes in relation to everything from Halo 5 and the original Halo Wars in just one scene. The cinematography, the music, and all the technical aspects of filmmaking flow together here so smoothly. But what really stands out to me is the character. Captain Cutter and Serena in the first games were just flat, one-dimensional characters. And after this monologue of Serena sending out her final message before rampancy, it was just so powerful to me, Especially when seeing how it affects Captain Cutter. This scene just gives me chills every time, dude. And the progress, it was just unreal, dude. And not just Cutter, but every character that returns has been revamped into being a real character. Hell, did you guys know that in Halo Wars 1, the Spartans weren't even named, dude? Everybody here, like from Jerome, Anders, Douglas, Alice, and Isabel, have more depth than anybody in Halo Wars 1. And it's just impressive, and I hope whoever wrote these characters still works at 343. Just look at how much character they develop in a few seconds for Anders, and even Cutter here.
I'll need to get down there. Immediately, of course.
Good morning to you too, Professor.
I'm sorry, Captain. It's good to see you too. But just look at it.
What is it? And where are we?
No idea. Our astronavigation system can't pinpoint a location. We're not on the map anymore.
We didn't drift out of the galaxy in 28 years, Professor. Since records show we arrived via slip space less than an hour ago.
Our slip space drive is gone. However we got here, it wasn't us who initiated the trip. Something down there must have opened the portal from this end and pulled us in.
Captain Cutter, sir, we received a signal from the surface. It's UNSC.
Signal to my location, Lieutenant. Let's hear what they have to say.
I'm sorry, Captain, I can't play it for you, sir. The message hasn't encryption scheme we haven't seen before.
Security measures would advance without us. But it is coming through on a UNSC frequency. This is good. When we left, the war wasn't going well. The signal means the UNSC's still fighting, or maybe we even won. What's the source of the transmission?
We don't have the surface details yet, sir. Something down there is blocking our scans, and without Serena... But we do have a rough location. Should be simple enough to triangulate once we pick up the signal from the ground.
Cut her to Jerome.
Reporting, Captain.
Prep Spartan Red Team and a small recon squad. Professor Anders will send you the coordinates. Find out who's sending that signal. Be on the ground within the hour. Travel light.
Roger that, Captain. Recon only.
28 years, Professor. Let's see what kind of galaxy we woke up to.
That little pause when Anders catches herself is just so natural. You really don't need in-depth backstories or super insane character arcs. For a character like Anders, all you need is just good writing to be a fan favorite, because the backstory just writes itself, you know? It makes sense that she would be so involved with this if the Spirit of Fire's back is against the wall, you know? She also climbed her way up to be a scientist for the UNSC. Of course she's going to be really fueled by curiosity, you know? It's just that in the first game, all her dialogue and actions felt super forced and unnatural.
We still don't know a lot about what's going on down there.
I understand that, Captain, but everything I see here tells me that we need to get to Arcadia to figure this out.
Like, dude, this writing is just really good, okay? Also, the glow up of Red Team, dude, for real. Halo Wars 2 is the only reason these guys are being requested to be in Infinite. Like, seriously, they went from being robots, borderline plot devices in the first game, to being good characters. It's what you'd expect. Douglas, Alice, Jerome are all good characters now. And there was no recap or backstory for them. They all just turned into fan favorites in just one level. Let me talk about the signal. Now, this is one of my favorite missions in the game because it's the most cinematic mission. The stuff you do makes you feel like you're in a movie, you know? But the reason this mission is so good is because of how it characterizes pretty much everything. From the second it starts, the Spartans start talking, you really get a sense of what they're about. Douglas being the more arrogant and confident guy who clearly loves the action. Alice also liking the action but being more calculated. And Jerome being the leader figure for them. It's obviously impossible to explain personality in just one sentence, but it shows how well done this was. The level also has that combat evolved way of introducing the Banished, which I thought was pretty neat, you know? It really builds up the tension of the Banished, and even though it wasn't like the same as the Flood, it didn't have to be, you know? It's just that extra level of effort with introducing an enemy, even if the player already knew what they were. But yeah, the level then transitions into a cutscene once you get to the signal. This is where Red Team meets Isabel and encounters the main villain of this game, Atriox. Once Red Team gets their ass kicked, they run to their Warthog to escape, and holy crap, dude, these characters only spit fire. Alice's delivery in this game is just really, really good, dude. But yeah, look at how the Banished tower over them, symbolizing the odds of this battle. And then we get a Warthog run, which is actually really cool, you know, in an RTS game. And it really does get your blood pumping, you know. You get back to the rally point and then boom, 500 years of progress in one mission. Now, I want to talk about the best and most focused on character arc in this game, Isabel. Now, the weapon in Halo Infinite is one of the most beloved characters for some reason, and I did get some backlash for saying she was bad, and I'm sorry guys, I have to get this off my chest, right? The weapon and Isabel play very similar roles in their stories. They are both inexperienced AIs that are forced to adapt to the way of combat and war. And the weapon is just so odd. She leans to this like robot doesn't understand emotions cliche, but at the same time makes so many sarcastic and kind of witty remarks all the time. She has this character arc not adapting into war because she kind of just accepts it, but rather bonding with Chief, except the drama is really forced and like, I'm going on a tangent guys, hold on. Isabel is a great character because she was originally just an AI for the research team on the Ark. No military or war purpose, just to aid and manage research. And the people around her were also most likely just people with no experience in war, you know? So when the Banished attacked, it scarred her, you know? The people with her didn't know what to do, so they panicked and begged her for help. And the fact that she didn't know what to do scared her so much. And when she's first on the Spirit of Fire, she was fueled by fear, begging them to run from the Banished. And her arc of having to adapt to war is her fear being turned into anger and eventually bravery. And this isn't just some forced arc, she's influenced by the characters around her as she learns. Cutter's speech teaches her why humanity has fought and still fights against impossible odds. Cutter represents the bravery of the UNSC, and Isabel represents the fear of civilian life. They have such a good dynamic, dude. She's also indirectly pushed by Jerome, who, by just doing his thing as a Spartan, forces Isabel to face her fears and try to be brave.
Wait, what? Wait a minute!
She also sometimes has these moments where she just loses composure when things go wrong. This reactive character arc is something that not enough games do, bro. It is really neat to see how characters can influence each other for the better or worse in stories. And I thought Halo Wars 2 did a great job with this. Cutter also has a great role in this game as a leader of a small ship calling his crew family. It might not seem like much, but you can tell how much he really cares about the Spirit of Fire because it isn't that big of a crew. He most likely knows everybody on the ship personally, and his care for his people represents the care humanity has for each other in war. Halo Wars 2 has great characters and great themes, and you have to give a lot of credit to those cutscenes, dude. They're just so creative with their production and really do show the emotion of the characters. The actors also did a great job, bro. You can really read the emotions that comes out of them when the characters talk, you know, it's incredible. Even in-game, the voice acting can be phenomenal, dude. Halo Wars 2 is a reminder of how good Halo stories can be with these 7 cutscenes. Wait a minute. Sadly, the story of Halo Wars 2 is not all sunlight and roses. Halo Wars 2 being an RTS game did not work well for this game's story. The story itself is very plot-driven, with most of the dialogue just being your objective. Most of the time it's shown to you in these little pre-game loading screens. The writing seriously drops in quality in these screens and in-game when the dialogue is about the objective. The game has like 12 missions, so a lot of the story happens outside of the cutscenes. And this means that a lot of the story just doesn't have that much writing quality or it doesn't feel that significant.
Your troops, take your ship, leave now, and I will not hunt you down.
Did you make the same offer to the people you slaughtered at that outpost?
Alice is one of the only characters who really gives off character while talking about the objectives, alongside parts of Jerome and Douglas. She goes on an entire adventure of staying behind to protect Jerome, regrouping with her captured allies, reconnecting with the Spirit of Fire, and then doing a lot of operations against the Banished. There was a moment where Isabel came on the comms and talked to Alice, and it felt so dumbed down because ultimately the point of the interaction was to communicate the objective to the player. And that's the problem. The events of the story that happen outside of the cutscenes can feel very forgettable because of the lack of character or emotion, and the plot itself is very operation driven. The Spirit of Fire really doesn't move throughout the story. The entire game is just Cutter playing chess with Atriox on the Ark, and ultimately, the game ends once the Spirit of Fire solidifies their presence on the Ark. This isn't really that engaging, and is probably the only area where this game loses to its predecessor, because in that game, there was a lot of adventure, a lot of movement, and in this game, the objectives can really just feel like orders sometimes. Also, this game really showed me a trend in how 343 writes their villains now that I'm beginning to not like. And no, it's not how they can sometimes just sit back the entire time. It's the fact that they're so focused on being just the most intimidating and badass they can be. Like, this is the case with Infinite and most certainly in the case in Halo Wars 2. And in my opinion, this seriously tones down any possibility for interesting character motivation for like sympathy or something like that. The first thing Atriox does in this game is massacre a group of Spartan 2s, the most lethal and powerful type of Spartan. And I can't get mad at the scene, but let me make it clear that even though the choreography is questionable, it did look cool. But yeah, anyway, Atriox just does everything to be intimidating that he just comes off as dull and uninteresting. His voice was specifically crafted to be as deep and menacing as possible. And yeah, I just don't find it interesting. The game did do a good job of introducing and presenting the Banished with the cutscenes and backstory. The Banished are the most interesting force since the Covenant, in my opinion, and I do like them a lot. But their leader, Aatrox, is where I don't like them. However, even with those problems, I do consider Halo Wars 2 to have one of the better stories in the Halo franchise. The characters, the arcs, the writing, the presentation all carry the story for me. It could have been better, do not get me wrong, but there are things that eventually come at a cost when handling the story in an RTS game. So now it's time for the DLC campaigns. And guys, this is awesome, alright? Halo Wars 2 is the only Halo game to have actual story DLC that continues the vision of the original game. Sure, Halo 4 had Spartanovs, but it's not real DLC, alright? And it should not have been because it replaced Firefight, alright? And then Halo 5 had free DLC, but they're really just a live service update and didn't really affect the campaign. But yeah, for Halo Wars 2, we got 2 new campaigns, and sure, they are pretty short, but this is just awesome, dude. Like, the fact that it even exists. So yeah, starting with the Spear Breaker DLC. This one is the weaker one, alright? You know that point I made about the in-game dialogue and how it was super operation driven? Yeah, this DLC is 2 missions and has no cutscenes. So, actual cutscenes. So any chance at characterization is just gone, alright? Like, I played yesterday at the time of recording this, and I can't even remember like any of the names of the guys, alright, other than Colony, but like, bruh, this is a DLC about an ODST squad that has to raid a Banished encampment to stop them from using a foreigner ship. So yeah, it's basically forgettable when it comes to the story. So yeah, you're only going to be playing these for the missions, which they're fine, you know. One is just a point capture mission, definitely a weaker one, where you have to capture all the points on the map and then fight an ultimate sentinel. The second mission is more creative, with having to use these big Colossuses to stomp on points where you have to fight a dynamic boss fight against a hero unit hunter. So yeah, this DLC doesn't have the best missions I've ever seen, but it does have sandbox elements that the original game doesn't, like the Colossus or those big shield sentinels. Also, Colony with the different types of hunters, those were awesome, dude. But yeah, it's basically just do more operations on the ring as ODSTs, and that's it. Cool for existing, but not anything special. Now guys, I am not joking when I say that Awakening the Nightmare is the most consistent and enjoyable RTS campaign I have ever played. Because it really feels like this was 343 learning from the original campaign and pushing ideas and mechanics for RTS games in general the right way. You can seriously see the level of effort that was put into this one, because it was kind of awkward with the Spearbreaker DLC. With that one, it didn't really feel realized at all, and you can tell that 343 probably like envisioned like a series of DLCs that would come out throughout the game's lifespan. But you can tell that they probably thought it would be easier, because the Spearbreaker DLC feels kind of like they got started, but they weren't really passionate at all about making it, so they just decided to finish it anyway. So that was kind of like the end of mini campaign DLCs, and yeah, that was for the better. So they probably just scrapped any other tiny DLCs and decided to go big for the next one. Awakening the Nightmare feels like a quality sequel to the first campaign. The game actually had cutscenes, production, ambition. They were literally bringing back the Flood for the first time in 10 years, bro. There was just so much effort that clearly went into making this, with the level of quality that it consistently delivers. Sure, the campaign is only 5 missions, but it comes with the removal of all that downtime in the original campaign. There's like 12 missions in the original, but a good chunk of them are just not really memorable because not a lot happens throughout them. Awakening the Nightmare has 5 missions where every one of them focuses on different ideas, and every one of them is extremely fleshed out. The level design here is just insane. There's no bad mission here. You got the Scarab transport mission where you have to protect the Scarab, but you also have to manage the Sentinel things by EMPing them so you don't get overrun. Once the Flood comes in, the mission shows their ferocity by continuously overpowering you with numbers, so you have to continue to retreat and set up defenses. The campaign does a beautiful job at using the barrier mechanic to the fullest. There's a mission where you can't get energy, so you have to get it manually to power drills. The Flood will come out in bursts, so it makes those moments of peace very tense and full of pressure. Then you have an absolute masterpiece mission where you are limited in numbers and you have to keep your jump pack brutes alive. There's a great sense of platforming and movement in this mission that really pushes the boundaries of what RTS games are capable of. There are so many mechanics here that are so unique to this game because you can tell that 343 really grounded themselves with the RTS genre for this campaign and really tried to innovate it with new mechanics that probably would have never been previously considered for an RTS game. You have those stealth parts, those laser parts, you even have puzzles sometimes, but again, these mechanics don't overstay their welcome and are either ended or expanded upon before they become dry. And then you have possibly the best level of all time in an RTS game, Manifestation, where you fight this huge flood grave mine. Look, man, I'm not even gonna spoil this mission. You guys have to experience it for yourself. Also, and what also elevates this campaign is the flood. They are just ruthless. It's the same thing as Halo 1, dude. This game takes everything you've learned from fighting the Banished, or even just humans in multiplayer games, and completely throws that out the window. The Flood are just so dynamic and menacing. They will continue to surprise you with tactics that you thought they would never use. They aren't super durable, but they come in huge numbers, and the thing about them is that they can infect your guys. So there's a new level of strategy that comes with making sure that you manage your guys right so they can't use them against you. But wait, how did this DLC manage the story? Now let me tell you, it doesn't reach the high highs of Halo Wars 2, but the game doesn't really focus on telling a thematic, character-driven story. But the character themselves and the adventure they go on is what makes the story so enjoyable. My biggest problem with Halo Wars 2 is how they handled the in-game dialogue. But bro, the Banished and this voice acting is just so enjoyable, dude. There are actual good character moments in-game. Voridus and Pavium are two brute brothers, and they have charming and enjoyable dynamic that is filled with just personality, you know? They aren't masterpieces, but they didn't have to be, you know? The grunts, the brute generals, the unit dialogue, the Banished is just filled with so many perspectives, and the dialogue never feels like it drops in quality in-game. Sure, you will have RTS exposition, but the delivery is just good, bro. Pavium is continuously warning his hot-headed, stubborn brother Voridus of his actions and how they can leave an impression on Atriox. Voridus keeps messing up and Pavium doesn't like it, sure, but they're brothers, they care for each other, and Pavium is scared because he will defend his brother and they'll both end up dead to Atriox. Voridus is constantly celebrating and talking about his legend, and Pavium is more pessimistic and looking at things in a more grounded and realistic way. And while there was one moment that I remember being a contributing factor to Isabel's arc that happened in-game, most of what I said about the two brothers was communicated to me through gameplay. And bro, we're talking about a story about the Flood being set loose and the Banished having to scramble and survive while also finding a way to stop the Flood before it spreads. If the characters were trash, this would still be an interesting story, but the character is there, and the story is engaging, and the levels are insane. Awakening the Nightmare is the most underrated campaign in RTS, and it is the best campaign in RTS. Please play this if you like RTS. Or even if you don't, you will still enjoy the creative use of these mechanics, bro. Awakening the Nightmare. Forever. In the end, Halo Wars 2 is a great game. A game that expanded on what the original set out to do and a return to form for the Halo franchise. The multiplayer, having a good selection and a good and passionate community that continued to play the game for a long time. Blitz, while not as ambitious as probably intended, was still a well-executed game mode. Terminus Firefight, one of the best RTS games of all time. The variety of units was also an outstanding factor for this game. And the campaign was a worthy sequel to the original, but in many people's eyes was important because of its story and how well it turned out. And when given another crack at the RTS formula, delivered one of the best RTS games of all time. So yeah, while having a few bumps, Halo Wars 2 comes good in the end. However, I did say I would score the game without expansion, so I give Naked Halo Wars 2 a 7. And including the DLCs, I give it a fat 8, bro. My favorite RTS game ever. But guys, before I end this, I want to say thank you. You know, this Halo journey has been awesome, and it brought a lot of you guys to my channel. And that is all I could ever ask for these videos, you know, for people to listen to what I have to say. So thank you guys so much for everything.